On today's episode of the Milk Making Minutes, you will hear a story of a mom who had two very different breastfeeding experiences due to two very different needs of her children. You will hear her process the grief and guilt that she has carried over needing to change the plan with her second due to his medical needs. She, like all of us, was doing the best that she could in a very difficult situation. As you listen, think about the times that you've put undue guilt on yourself by comparing yourself either to others or to your own idealized version of yourself. See if you can, like Chelsea, name that you did the best thing for yourself and for your children, and finally let go of the comparison.
When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. I may have thought I was prepared, but having known only a handful of people who had ever breastfed and only seeing it up close from a couple of them, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I have become a doula, a lactation consultant, and a childbirth educator. Many of my clients are surprised by their own self-doubt and anxiety over every baby feeding decision. And in the years that I've been connecting with people during pregnancy and breastfeeding, I've seen time and time again that those anxieties are reduced through hearing from others about their experiences without judgment or fear. Welcome to the Milk Making Minutes. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh. I invite you to sit back and listen in to reduce your breastfeeding anxiety through explorations of real-life breastfeeding.
Hi, Chelsea. Welcome to the Milk Making Minutes. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and your family.
Sure. Sounds great. Well, you'll get to know me quickly that I love sharing everything, but I will try to keep it short. My name is Chelsea. I am married to my husband, Justin. We've been married. This year will be our 10-year anniversary. And after 2 years of being married, we had our first child. She is just turned 8, our daughter, Charlie. She's God's gift to me. She's just the sweetest. She's like my little best friend. And then a few years later, we had our son, Jackson, who is now 5. And that was a whole nother story. So, yep, we're just a family of 4. I think we're done. We have a doggo and 2 cats and a tortoise.
And you are the host of a really cool podcast. Do you want to describe your podcast really quickly before we move on?
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot that. Yes, I am the host of Beyond the Picket Fence with Chelsea Bea. Basically, you can listen to my podcast for my whole story, but long story short, I just realized that my whole life I was comparing myself to other people and it was really putting me down. And as I had the opportunity to go into more and more women, especially women's homes, they would share their whole story with me. And I just realized, oh my gosh, everyone has a huge story that we're not seeing. And so it really helped me to stop judging. And I just had this natural gift of kind of interviewing people without realizing. And I just thought, I need to get these stories recorded because these people are just incredible. So I provide like a safe space for people to just come be vulnerable and not judged. And it's really been good for my soul.
I love that, Chelsea. I love that. Yeah. So you and I have a lot in common because I am an oversharer. That's something I know about you too. I'm like a typical oversharer and I get these like vulnerability hangovers. I think Brene Brown, she talks about that. And I've had a lot of trauma like in the last 4 years with my family. And ever since then, I love your show. I love your podcast because ever since the trauma in my family, I look at other people and I think, what has happened to them? You know, because I walk around on the street and I'm like, people don't know. People don't know what's going on in my family. People don't know what has happened to me. People don't know the stuff I've been dealing with. And, you know, if I go through the drive-thru, if I'm at the grocery store, I'm like, can you see it in my eyes, you know? And so the fact that you get people on and you have them share these vulnerable moments in their life and bring the humanity into it is really beautiful. So I'll definitely share your show in the show notes.
Thank you.
And I hope
Thank
people
you.
check
I'm
it
really
out.
excited. Yeah, it's crazy to me. Just one more small note on that, because of course I could talk about that forever. But it's crazy to me how humans just walk around and we see each other and it's just like, oh, we just see a bunch of humans. Like, I can't believe the things that people go through and how we're all just walking around like nothing happened. It's insane, especially with all of like the political stuff going on these days and everyone's so opinionated. I just needed to create a space for me where I was just really just a place for humans to feel safe and vulnerable, and that you're not alone and we can walk this journey together no matter what race, sexual identity, any of that stuff.
Yeah. And for me, breastfeeding, when I became a parent, I did not expect it to throw me for a loop like it did, because I had grown up around children my whole life. I was a nanny of an infant. I had a bazillion cousins. I had babysat my whole life. My husband had not grown up around kids in the same way that I had. But when I became a mom, my entire identity shifted. And in the same way that, you know, you're talking about going into people's homes and them sharing their stories with you, I began to look at people who had become moms before me, and I thought, is this what it's like for you? This is what you went through? You feeding your babies was like this? Yes. And that's what led me into the field of lactation and becoming a lactation consultant, because my experience was so difficult with my first. And I thought, I've got to do something to change this. And I've got to make an impact in whatever way I can. And that's what brought me to the Milk Making Minutes as well, because I think having a space where people can normalize their experiences and share their stories. And the whole mission of the Milk Making Minutes is to reduce breastfeeding anxiety through a normalizing of experiences. So there's that fine line between like, oh no, another horror story. Yes. And okay, so that's possible. And this is possible. Oh, and that's another possibility. But if you know what could be coming, you can also be aware of, oh, so this happened to Chelsea, or that happened to Griselda. So I'm going to be looking out for that. And then you can take action. Whereas if you've never heard of what is a possibility, then you're not as able to take action. And then also, of course, there are the stories where everything went well, and people can hear those stories too. So people are able to kind of hear both.
Yeah, and learn from that. Yeah, I'm so excited that you invited me on, because I have with my podcast I always talk about this subject of comparison. And I mean, I nursed both my kids, but I never saw how much comparison really thread throughout my whole life and my experience. So when you invited me to come on the show, and I was thinking, okay, how can I turn this to be about breastfeeding? And I just saw, holy crap, I did this comparison thing, not only with like to other people's breastfeeding stories, but I compared each kid's situation, and you can't do that because each kid is so different. So I'm so excited that you got me to think about like even taking comparison as a huge thing and just focusing it straight on breastfeeding.
I love that. Okay, cool. So as we get into your breastfeeding experiences, what was your exposure to breastfeeding and baby feeding before it was your turn?
So my mom had a baby when I was 12 years old. She actually got her tubes reversal, like a tube tie reversal.
Wow.
And then had a lot of miscarriages trying to have my little sister.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So finally, when I was 12, my mom had a baby. And that's a pretty old age to watch your mom have a baby. And I specifically remember her sitting in this chair in a room, nursing my little sister. And then she got up to go to the bathroom or something. And she was sitting on like one of those pads. And like there was some blood on the pad. And I was like, oh, that's terrifying. And I asked my mom, I'm like, why is there blood on that? And she's like, well, when you're nursing, it kind of hurts, you know, after I don't know. I didn't notice it with my first kid, but I did the second time. I'm like, holy crap, this hurts and I'm bleeding. So yeah, that was like my first exposure, and I was like terrified.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, why is that hurting her uterus and making her bleed just by feeding my sister? I'm so scared. And I don't really like blood or medical things or things like that. So yeah, I was terrified. But I also, it's life. I knew I wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think. I thought I wanted to do it, but I was scared.
Yeah. Okay. So that was when you were 12. And then when you were thinking about starting your family, had you seen breastfeeding up close and personal besides your mom?
Yeah. I also have three sisters above me. And so I just grew up with, they all got married. They all had, two of them had kids, and I watched them try to do it. My oldest sister couldn't do it, didn't like it, said boobs were for, your lover, not your child. And then my other sister had just like it's what seemed perfect to me. Obviously nothing's perfect, and then, yeah, just as I grew up, I just saw, just at church, there's like a mother's lounge at the church I go to, and there'd be people nursing. So I had seen it everywhere. It was never something that I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just didn't think about it. It was just like a normal, this is just life. You just have to feed your baby.
I asked Chelsea if there was anything she did to prepare for breastfeeding once she was pregnant with her oldest. She told me she didn't take any birth or breastfeeding classes and only followed advice given to her by her grandmother, who suggested she rub her nipples to prevent chapped nipples once the baby was breastfeeding. This is a common piece of advice passed down by older generations, but research has shown it does not prevent nipple damage, which is primarily caused by a latch which does not have enough breast tissue in the mouth. After we cleared that up, I asked Chelsea if there was anything that happened during her birth that may have had an impact on her breastfeeding experience.
It's interesting because I listened to your last episode, and so since I've just been listening to your show, I've learned a lot because I'm not in the breastfeeding zone right now. You know what I mean? So I didn't even, so much. I'm so happy that you're doing this because I had no idea that the birth even could affect the nursing. But as I was listening to your last episode, I just was thinking, like, my birth was very peaceful. I did get an epidural. I didn't take any classes because I decided if I make a plan and it doesn't go according to the plan, I'm going to be annoyed. So I'm just not going to make a plan. And I was scared because I'm like, a human head is going to come out of my vagina. That's so scary. And so I was like, I'm just going to be like the camel that buries their head. I'm just going to let whatever happen. So I just went in very open-minded to whatever was going to happen. But I knew I wanted an epidural. I got the epidural. I can't remember exactly how long I labored, but it only took like 3 pushes to get her out.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't really painful. It was just like, it's, when you go to therapy and they say, think of your safe place or like your happiest memory, like having my first child was so beautiful. It just was like heaven was in the room. And I just remember I didn't ever like scream or yell at my husband all crazy. I just was like, this moment is just so beautiful. And they just put the baby on me and I just held the baby, even though the baby was disgusting. And there wasn't any, like, I don't remember there being any bad feeling or any stress or any fear or anything like that. So it was just like, I would do labor every day of my life. I love giving labor. I just think it's the most beautiful thing, and heaven is so close. So it was, so I don't know if that affected my nursing or not, but my daughter came with these big, ginormous lips that were just like these amazing lips. My husband also has big, nice lips. And I don't remember when I started nursing or anything. I just remember it just worked. Like, she latched, she sucked, my boobs filled up great. Like, it was going so well that I never pumped, not even once. And actually, I probably did pump because I went, like, when she was 6 months old, I went on a cruise with my sisters and left my baby, and I left enough milk to last the whole 5-day cruise because I was like a freaking dairy. I just like,
wow. Okay.
So it was like the best of best situations.
So just like a dream. Yeah.
It was just perfect. And I just, like, nursing was such a beautiful, I couldn't believe how much love and connection I felt to, and I didn't know if I was going to like it or not. Like I said, I went in very open-minded, but it was amazing.
Oh man. Okay. So you said you don't know if your birth had an impact on whether or not breastfeeding went well for you, but to say that, like, you felt close to heaven in that moment, breastfeeding has a lot to do with, your hormones control what's happening in breastfeeding, and oxytocin and breastfeeding are closely intertwined. So if you're having this, like, euphoric experience during birth, you've got that oxytocin flowing, right? Whereas if somebody is having a stressful birth and you have stress hormones flowing, stress hormones and oxytocin, they're not going to be flowing at the same time. And so that could, to have this euphoric birth experience, that definitely could impact what's happening at breastfeeding.
That is so cool. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Which is why it's so important to make sure that the birthing room is a place where somebody is experiencing oxytocin.
Yeah. And I think I was really lucky because I didn't plan. I didn't go to classes. I didn't have a doula. I didn't do any of the natural stuff. So I can't believe how lucky I was that I was in a hospital where they took really good care of me. They let me have my baby as long as I needed. I was very lucky in the fact that everything went so well.
Yeah. Yeah.
After hearing so many other people's horrific stories, I'm like, wow, I was so lucky to have the experience I did.
Do you know anything about the hospital you gave birth in? Do you know if it had a baby-friendly certification?
I don't, but I can look it up and get it back to you. I don't.
I'm just curious.
I really don't get into details like that.
Was it a small regional hospital? Was it a bigger hospital?
Yeah, it was small. It's small. It was closer to my house. They don't have a NICU there. Mm-hmm. It's a smaller one. And we stayed for a night or two, I can't remember. And then they sent us home. And when they sent us home with a lasagna dinner.
Wow. Yeah. That's fantastic. I've never heard of somebody going home from the hospital with a lasagna dinner.
Yeah, it was dinner, lasagna and breadsticks and a salad. It was amazing. I was
good for them.
Do this every day.
Yeah, right? I know. No wonder you could give birth over and over again.
I was blessed to have gone to a good hospital. I didn't even know.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so did they offer lactation support or you just didn't even need it?
They offered it. I remember we watched, you have to watch all those videos in the hospital before you can go home. And then I think if my memory serves me correctly, I'm pretty sure someone came in and did teach me with the whole breast. That's when I learned it's not just the nipple. It's the nipple should be so far back in their mouth that it's not even being sucked on. If your nipple's hurting, you're doing it wrong. So that's when I learned that.
Okay.
But yeah, because she came in twice, the lactation person, and because I just feel like Charlie was so good at it that she was like, I think you got it. And so then I was like, okay.
Okay, cool.
Super blessed.
Cool. Once you went home, did you run across anybody who was not supportive of you breastfeeding? Was there anyone in your community who you felt like it was difficult to breastfeed around, or it really just was this perfect dreamboat breastfeeding experience with her?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of perfect moments in my life, but this was definitely the most, it wasn't even unsupportive. It was just, my oldest sister's like, I can't believe you can breastfeed. That is so weird. That was it. But it wasn't it wasn't like you shouldn't breastfeed. Uh-huh. That was it. And it wasn't, if she hears this, I don't think anything, I didn't feel harmed by what she thought. I just thought that was her opinion. So I'm telling you, this first breastfeeding experience is ridiculous.
Yeah. And so you went on that cruise at 6 months, and then how long did you continue to breastfeed?
I breastfed her 18 months because, but they eat food and stuff, but I don't know how anyone feels about co-sleeping, but I co-slept for 6 months and just the real reason I loved breastfeeding, one, the connection with my daughter was just unmatchable. Mm-hmm. And then two, I didn't have to make bottles or wash bottles or anything. So I literally just slept with just my boob out. And then if she just drank whenever she wanted to. So we slept through the night because she would just feed herself. Yeah. So it was just so much easier.
Yeah.
It was when she bit me, I stopped. No, thank you.
And that took until 18 months for her to bite you?
Yeah, because she was eating food, and I wasn't, when you're nursing, it's a lot when they're little, and then as they grow up, they get on regular food. And so until she went to whole milk. So yeah, I think I nursed her for comfort so I don't know when she got on milk, at a year, but I completely stopped. She bit me at around 18 months, and I flicked her in the face and I stopped. I never. I shouldn't have done that, but I did. It hurt so bad.
Yeah.
I was like, if you're hungry enough to start chewing, we're done.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit surprised that it took all the way until 18 months for that first bite.
Like I said, it was ridiculously perfect. Like nothing in my life is perfect, but when I thought about it, I'm like, maybe I'm remembering it wrong. It's been 8 years.
Yeah. Well, I am so happy for you that you got to have that perfect experience.
Well, I didn't realize how perfect the experience was until the next experience. So
yes. Dun, dun, dun. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So let's go ahead then. And if you feel ready to transition, let's talk about that second experience because I know it was more challenging.
Do you love to read about pregnancy, childbirth, and breastfeeding? Are you looking for books to help you become a more confident parent? Or perhaps books to help you understand what went wrong with your breastfeeding journey or to do better next time with breastfeeding? Or do your kids have questions about breastfeeding or pregnancy, but you don't really know how to answer them? Would you prefer to have a curated list on these topics? Go to the link in the show notes to my new affiliated bookshop. Every purchase you make benefits the Milk Making Minutes. But better than that, these books are vetted. I've read them all, and I feel very confident recommending them to you. I'll be adding to them continuously, so go to that link when you want to purchase a book. It will help the show, and you can feel confident it will be a purchase you will enjoy.
I started the Milk Making Minutes because I'm passionate about supporting breastfeeding people. But more importantly, I knew that hearing real people tell real stories would benefit both the storytellers and the listeners. I had this idea for 3 years before I launched. I asked so many people how I should begin, and Anchor came up repeatedly as the easiest way to launch a podcast. And I have not been disappointed. If you are passionate about a topic and have wanted to start a podcast, you can use Anchor to record and distribute your podcast. It's easy to use. You can use the editing tools right from the platform. You can distribute your podcast episodes seamlessly to listening platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts right from Anchor. And the best part is, it's free. And the tech support has been great too. Go to anchor.fm or download the app right to your phone to get started on your great podcast idea.
As you think about that second experience, because you had that perfect experience the first time, I'm suspecting you really didn't feel like you needed to do anything to prepare.
Yes, obviously.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm a breastfeeding champion.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So was there anything that was different the second time around as far as the birth?
Yes. So like I said, I didn't realize how amazing that situation was until the second situation. My son was diagnosed with a pretty serious congenital heart defect at 23 weeks in the womb. So the whole energy around this pregnancy was different. It was like, honestly, nursing wasn't even in my head because I was just like, this baby's going to get born and then it's just going to be like preparing for heart surgeries. And it was just a totally different experience. I can say that I forgot to rub my nipples with the washcloth. That's the difference in preparation is it was like 2 months until I was supposed to have the baby. I was like, I didn't do the washcloth thing. So like I did it the last 2 months, which is so stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, we're a spiritual family and religious, and I got a blessing. Like when I first found out he had a heart defect, I was stressed, but then I got a blessing from my father, which is just like they place their hands on your head and they just like give you what we call a priesthood blessing in our religion. And it's supposed to be just like Heavenly Father talking to you through the priesthood power of God. And the blessing just blessed me to just have peace. And so I just felt I didn't research, like my mother-in-law, it helped her to research the heart defect. And I, again, the same way I was before I had my other baby, I just wanted to be open-minded to whatever was going to come. I just had peace. And then we were driving to the hospital to have the baby. I was in labor and I was just like, all right, here it goes. Our whole life is going to change. So we went, and again, though, I love labor. The labor was just as beautiful. It was just a little bit more scary because I didn't know what was going to happen. And the whole NICU team, was on call. Like when I started pushing, they were like, wait, you can't push until the NICU team arrives. And This is probably going to make so many people mad, but I love labor. I had the epidural for however many hours and just labored fine. And then I like felt like I had to poop. And so that was like the sign that you have to push, even though you're numb. That's like the only way you can think of it.
Mhm.
And I was like, I'm going to have the baby. And she came in and checked and she was like, oh my gosh, the baby's head is like right there. And so the doctor came in, they rushed the NICU team in, and I literally laughed out I started laughing and the
Oh
baby
my
came
God.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the birth was still not traumatic.
Great.
And I didn't know if I was going to get to hold my baby or not because they had to assess to see if the baby was blue. So this time I did not get to hold the baby right away. They took the baby into the NICU station area in the room, like cleaned it off, checked his oxygen levels, and just assessed if like he was safe to hold, And luckily we got to hold our baby. I don't think my husband did, but I got to hold my baby for I think 2 to 5 minutes before he had to go to the NICU. So I was just grateful because I honestly didn't think I was going to get to hold him. And so I was just grateful for that few minutes that I did get to hold him.
And they had prepped you for that in
Yes.
the prenatal period.
I had been preparing, like doing stress tests twice a week. And then as we got closer and closer to labor, it was interesting because I had like the perinatal doctor and then my OBG, and they couldn't decide. The perinatal doctor wanted me to have the baby early because they were thinking the baby wasn't doing good, even though he was passing his stress tests. And the OBGYN was like, we should get this baby out as soon as possible. And the perinatal doctor's like, the baby's still doing good. It needs to stay in the uterus as long as it can. So I actually did get full term. And yeah, so they like right before I was going into labor, they had coached me like, this is what it's going to look like. There's going to be a whole team of people. I had gone to the hospital and met the NICU team. So yeah, there was a lot of preparation for all of that jazz. And then it happened and it was crazy.
Was there any talk in that prenatal period about what breastfeeding might look like for you, or the possibilities of breastfeeding, or any suggestion to talk to a breastfeeding expert to maybe get some help with what it could look like for you so that you could kind of prepare for what breastfeeding a child with special medical conditions would look like?
Yeah, I would say in that area, no. There was no support there. It was very much focused on just making sure he was going to be alive. They had said that heart children, cardiac kids, have a hard time. Like it takes a lot of energy for them to eat. So they didn't know that he would breastfeed. But there was no like support on my side. They knew that they asked my opinion, and I said I would like to breastfeed if I can, but there was no support like that. No.
Okay.
That I can recall.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So after a few minutes, baby goes to the NICU.
Mm-hmm.
And then does the hospital staff know that you want to breastfeed?
Yeah, everyone knew that I wanted to. They really just had, because of his serious condition, he was actually better than they thought when he came out. They thought that his aorta was going to be clamped shut in the ultrasounds, but when he came out, his aorta was actually fine for him. So super lucky. He didn't have to get flown to a different hospital. He was just able to stay in that NICU. It was amazing. But yeah, everyone knew I wanted to breastfeed. And that was like, when you have a baby that's sick and you have no control over what's going to happen, in my head, I was like, okay, what's the one thing I can control? And I was like, I can feed this baby. I can make, whether or not he can nurse, I can make milk. So I, like, as soon as he got taken away from me, I started pumping. Because I was like, I can make milk. Because I knew with Charlie, I made milk fast and good, And I was still in this beautiful moment of being able to nurse. Like, I still thought I could do it really good. And even if it was just pumping and the baby can't nurse, I can make milk. Like, I know that I can make milk because I've done it in the past. And so I started pumping, and the pumping wasn't super great. And so then I started hand expressing, which amazing. I was just so excited because I don't know. I was really positive before some future trauma that we'll get to. So I was still really positive and really calm. And I was just in my room, hand expressing. I'd be like, look, I got 5 mLs of colostrum. I'm amazing. And then they would send it in the tube up to the NICU, and then they would feed it to my baby. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Until I could get up there. So I literally stayed up that night, when you're supposed to be holding your baby and loving on your newborn baby and working on nursing. I stayed up all night just milking myself. because that was all I could do.
Mm-hmm.
And I started making good milk, but it was very lonely. It was very
I
lonely.
bet. Yeah. And babies at the NICU in an isolette.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how long before you were able to visit baby?
So, visit baby, I pretended like I just told them, like, I don't know. The time is so weird in the hospital, but I got up there to visit the baby the same day.
Okay.
I remember pretending like I was, like, they were like, you need to walk, once the epidural wears off. And I was like, I'm fine. And so I just like walked, even though you couldn't feel my legs, because I wanted to see my baby. And so they pushed me up in a wheelchair up to see the baby. And I think I did at that point they hadn't like ran all the right tests yet to make sure he was okay. So I think I saw him, like I just looked at him and like reached in and touched him. But it was so weird because most babies in the NICU are like preemie babies, right? But here's this full-term giant. My baby looked huge compared to all the other ones. So then it was a few days of running tests, and I got them to let me stay one extra night at the hospital. And I would just stay up all night, milk myself, work on making milk, like sleep when I need to, eat, and then I would go back up and sit in the NICU. So once it was the second day after I had him, they had found out that he was put on a lot of medicine, but he was he didn't need a breathing tube. He was doing really good, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And he stayed in the NICU for 16 days. So I would go every day and do skin to skin time and hold him. It's just really interesting because I've had experience where I'm in the hospital with my baby in the NICU. And then I've had experience like after my baby was home with me and then we were in the hospital. When he had never come home with me, it didn't really feel like he was mine, really. And so
Right.
I would come and stay for a few hours and then leave. But then the next time, like after he had been home with me and then went in for heart surgeries, I never left the hospital because then he was like my baby. So he came home after 16 days. And at that point, there was lactation help in the lactation came to me in the NICU whenever I would hold my baby. Because he did have like monitors and stuff, but slowly like his IVs came out and everything came out. And I was pumping and sending milk. And then, I like hand expressing better.
And how did you know about hand expression?
I don't know. I just did it.
Okay.
I just remember like rubbing it and it like squirted out. And I was like, wow. And so I just I think I just thought of like milking a cow. It was easier and it like sprayed a lot more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Intuitive, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
It is a thing. It's absolutely a thing. And in fact, there is some research to indicate that people who do some hand expression of colostrum in the last 4 weeks, people who are low risk, but in the last 4 weeks of pregnancy, and then add on hand expression to breastfeeding in the first couple of months of their baby's life, they have increased milk supply throughout their baby's life.
That's probably why I had so much milk. Even the second time around, I can make a ton of milk. So, but I was still in this kind of euphoric idea. Like I knew my kid needed surgery, but he came out better than they thought. And now he was home. But heart kiddos really cannot nurse. Like eating is like their exercise. That's the most strenuous thing they do. So Jackson nursed 5 minutes every 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So he was on me all the time. I didn't mind because I just was grateful that he was alive and well. And he didn't look as pale as heart babies usually look because my husband has really nice like olive skin. And so does my daughter. And my son got that skin too. It wasn't until his heart was fixed when his skin looked really olive. I was like, oh dang, you were a little pale. So yeah, life was pretty good. Like he came home. We went to cardiologist appointments. He was on Lasix, which helps. It's like a certain type of medicine. And he was nursing. And
how would he get the Lasix? Drops or?
Yeah, I think by mouth. I think I would put it like on my nipple and then like squeeze it as he was sucking. He did hurt. I do remember it hurting a little more with him because he didn't always latch very good, as good. But I think because I like when I let down, I spray so much that I think, and like sometimes it would be so much that he'd be like drowning and he'd pull away and it would just be like squirting his face. But overall, it still felt pretty good, like that euphoric feeling. But once when he was 4 months old, this is when it all kind of went to crap because he went and he got his surgery and we experienced we were in his hospital room and when they get heart surgery, they have all the tubes and the breathing tubes and stuff. So he was being fed through an NG tube. And I was like, I got to keep doing this milk because it's all I've got to give. And then the oxytocin stopped producing in my brain when we were in the room when he coded. So he went into cardiac arrest and we were in the room, and it's taken a long time. I'm going to get emotional because it's taken a long time to get over seeing that my baby was dead, even though he's still here and he's 5 now. In my head, he was dead. And I just lost that happy, positive Chelsea that I've been my whole life. And my milk started to slow down, and he was so touchy that like if we just touched him the wrong way, his numbers would start to go down. And it was like he was about to code. And so and if I walked out of the room, his numbers would go down. And so as he was slowly healing, he still had a leak in the valve that was repaired. And so he started throwing up, and he never drank. He never nursed again. He had an NG, and they would feed him, and then he would throw up. And so he started to hate like the taste of milk. And also because he cried unless I was right by him, I never had time to go out and pump. And I was stressed. So my milk just completely dried up, which was insane. I didn't realize, I didn't connect the hormone thing, but there was all the stress and there was everything. And I kept doing that horrible thing we as mothers do to ourselves. Like, this is the one thing I could offer him, and I can't even make milk for him.
Do you know the thing that you were offering him, right? You were staying there by his side.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. It was just really, really hard because, yeah, I loved nursing with Charlie, and I am too afraid to have another kid. I don't think we'll have any more kids after all of that trauma, but I do wish I could have one more regular nursing experience because it was so beautiful the first time, and it was so, he ended up having, like, he wouldn't eat. He ended up getting a G-tube and needed like eating therapy, and feeding him has just been a living nightmare. And
still to this day.
I mean, he eats by mouth now. He doesn't have a G-tube anymore. But he's very picky and has like bowel problems and constipation problems. And yeah, it's still not fun to feed him.
Oh my gosh.
And so here I have, and then I realized, like, when you asked me to come on the show, I realized, like, oh my gosh, I did this comparison thing with my kids. Like, I punished myself so long for not being able to make Jackson the milk he needed, and he had to be on formula, and I couldn't figure out how to feed him. And I was so hard on myself, so unnecessarily hard on myself. Like, that's when I realized we cannot compare each child's nursing to another child's nursing.
No.
Even to, like, of course we compare ourselves to our friends, you know, like with Charlie, I would be at the restaurant eating dinner, and I could just like pop her on my boob and eat at the restaurant. And with Jackson, I had to take out the feeding pump bag, load and prime the feeding pump, hook it to his G-tube. And it was just like, how sad for him that whole time I was comparing him to Charlie, who Charlie didn't have to face what he faced. We cannot compare. It causes so much unnecessary pain, and I already had enough pain. I didn't need the extra pain.
Yeah, exactly. And you were doing so much just to maintain the health of your child.
Yeah. And then when he was throwing up, like people who have babies that throw up their milk, and then you feel like, what's wrong with my milk?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think instinctively as mothers, we just want to feed our babies.
Right.
So we don't need extra judgment from each other, and we don't need judgment from ourselves.
No, of course not. Of course not. So that was at 4 months old when he had the surgery.
Yep. That was from 4. He had his first surgery October 10th, 2017. And then he's had 2 more heart surgeries since then. So that all of that, I think when I finally stopped pumping, had to have been November.
Okay.
So he was born in July, and I nursed him till November. I mean, I nursed him until October, and then I pumped for him until November. But then I couldn't step away to pump, and I couldn't produce milk. As someone who has always produced milk, it was so sad. So how many months is that? June, July, August, September, October, November. So only 6 months. That's sad.
I would like to encourage you to change that language and say 6 whole months. And I don't know if you know this, but every teaspoon of breast milk has 3 billion antibodies in it.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
And to think about a child who has a congenital heart defect, I'm sure that having 3 billion antibodies for every teaspoon of breast milk you were able to provide for him, I'm sure he was immunologically compromised to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that you were able to provide that for him for 6 whole months in his most compromised state is amazing.
That's so true. Thank you for helping me see that. See, this is why we need each other.
Yeah.
It's easy to be hard on ourselves, but yeah, I worked really hard and did the best I could. And that's kind of my message is I hope that we can all kind of be more gentle with ourselves and kinder to ourselves. So thank you for saying that and helping me say that. I will work on changing that mentality. That's why.
And one of the things I think it's important for people to be able to do when it comes to breastfeeding is it is okay to grieve a lost experience.
Yeah.
Because many times, especially other medical professionals, pediatricians, other care providers. So I'm sure your son has had many, many medical professionals over the years that he has worked with. They will be dismissive when a breastfeeding mother expresses sadness over the lost breastfeeding experience. And they'll say, focus on the healthy baby. You have a healthy baby. Like, that's the most important thing. And
I just have to thank you for letting me come on here because I don't think I realized all of this until I thought about my whole comparison idea as it applied to nursing.
In my conversation with Chelsea, I made an error. I told her that every teaspoon of breast milk has 3 billion antibodies. It's actually the case that every teaspoon of breast milk has 3 million germ-fighting antibodies. But I still think the point stands that she was doing a great thing for her son for as long as she was able during a critical time in his life.
Because I know that I have said that, like, if I had another baby, it would be because I love labor and I miss nursing. I loved nursing. So it's been I'm just grateful that you let me come on and just realize that, like, 1, I did an amazing job, and 2, it was a loss. And there is a lot of loss. Even though I have my son, I've had to acknowledge that there was a lot of loss. Grieving a life that you thought you would have that turned out a lot different.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Have you found support groups, or are there like online groups of other parents who have children with congenital heart defects that you have found solidarity in? And
yeah, well, because of my toxic trait of comparing myself to other people, I don't know how much you want to talk about my podcast on your podcast, but that is one of the main, like, during all of that, I was on Facebook scrolling and just seeing how amazing other moms were handling this and how compared to those moms that were doing it great, I was not doing it great. And so I actually had to completely get off of Facebook altogether. And in that, I was able to have time to actually go into people came into my home and helped me and served me. And I was like, the story goes on because he had his second surgery, finally came home, and he had been on morphine for so long that he was withdrawing. He had a withdraw wean schedule with methadone, clonidine, and Ativan for 3 months. So I didn't go home with like this baby that was doing good, like they said, after 14 days. We were in the hospital for 3 months. And then I got to go home for 3 months with a drug withdrawing baby, which is just a screaming baby constantly. And I couldn't move. Like, if I moved, it would hurt him. And so I just sat in a chair and just held my baby. I was in my underwear. The house is falling apart around me. And these women came into my home and they just loved me and they just helped me. And as we just sat there, they opened up to me about their hard things that they had gone through. And that is where I found solace and community, is just
Mm-hmm.
realizing that everyone has a story and no one's life is perfect.
Yeah.
And so that's where those conversations started to happen, and where I started to kind of forget myself and just start loving on and hearing other people's story and just embracing vulnerability. Like if we could show everyone that it's okay not to be okay,
Mm-hmm.
like it's okay not to be okay, totally fine. And no one's life on Facebook. So I've been recently back on Facebook in hopes to change the culture of like social media. Like I show all of the dumb, silly, like I just made a video on Instagram of me singing as an alien. Like I need Facebook and social media to be less perfect so that we can connect more deeply with each other, so that we can learn from each other. I would have never known all of this stuff about nursing had I not connected with you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when I asked you to come be on my show, you said, I want you to know that my second experience, I used formula. Is that okay? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. You know, people have been on my show and used formula. And you did not give me the details of why you used formula. So I did not.
As I freaking had to.
Right. But let me tell you how many times in my practice have had a parent sitting with me, bawling her eyes out because she just has given it her all. Her baby is not in the hospital after heart surgery with tubes and throwing up her breast milk. She just has tried as hard as she can, and she's getting to the point where she's saying, I think I need to make a different choice. Mm-hmm. That is a perfectly fine reason to decide you are going to feed formula too.
Yes, right? That's what I'm saying is let's normalize not shaming each other for decisions we need to make for our own mental. It is okay if you want to breastfeed until your kid is 9 and walks up to you and sucks out your boob. I mean, I don't know. I have seen that happen. Maybe not 9, like 5. But that's your life. You're the mother of that child. You're not hurting them. It is okay if your child has a lactose intolerance, but you want to drink milk still, so you give them formula. It's like whatever you decide is right for you and your family. That's the message that I hope to share through your podcast is comparison and judgment. There's just no place for it because everyone's doing their best.
And I truly do believe if we had better societal support, better policy supports, better medical supports, if more medical people were actually more informed about breastfeeding, many more people would breastfeed and many more people would breastfeed for longer. I do truly believe that. But given the situation that we have today, I am going to support you even as a lactation consultant. If you come to me and you say, I need a plan to get off of breastfeeding and onto formula feeding without getting mastitis, I am going to say, great, let's create that plan for you. Mm-hmm. Because that's what people need. People need to feel like they are in charge of their decisions.
Yes.
And they need to feel good about where they are. So, of course,
like you said, supported is huge.
Yeah.
Like, it would have been, who knows if someone would have been there for me. Like, hey, I'm the lactation consultant. I will come sit with your baby while you go pump for 10 minutes. Like, huge.
Right.
And I didn't even, because of the trauma happening, I didn't even think to ask that or to have anyone do that. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I would have loved to have kept feeding him breast milk as long as I could.
Right. Or how can we figure out a way for you to pump and be here with your baby? Like, or let's talk through all the different scenarios. What do you truly want right now? Let's figure out how we make that happen for you.
Yes. And what you asked, I didn't realize when you said, like, did you have support before having the baby or anyone talk to you? Like, the literally only help that they provided was it could be hard for him to eat because he's a hard kid. I should have had someone educate me.
And you didn't.
Could've.
Right. And so you did the best you could in the situation you had. You provided him breast milk for a long ass time, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. You provided him many billions of antibodies And comfort too, you know?
Yeah, it was hard. I
Yeah.
don't judge anyone who has to make decisions in those situations. I'm grateful I went through everything because I'm a much kinder, compassionate woman, but I don't envy anyone.
Yeah.
I don't envy anyone and their problems.
I know. Right. Right. Yeah. And so are there any like long-term worries for your son's health that you're still thinking about?
So his first surgery, he had the wall was missing and the two valves from the other sides connected. So they had to build a wall and then create valves on each side. Okay. One of the valves didn't get fixed as good. So one of the valves didn't get as fixed as good. So the second surgery, they had to cut his valve out and replace it with a fake valve. So from now on, whenever those valves fail, he'll need a new one. So he just had his last valve replacement September 2020. So once that valve stops working, he'll have his next surgery. And he also has a pacemaker because his heart rate was very slow. Like they call it bradycardia. So yeah, we still have doctor's appointments every 6 months, and he's followed by GI. He has constipation issues, which help him. Like he's technically malnourished because he doesn't like to eat because he's constipated. So the chemicals are not in his brain are not sending that he's hungry because he's constipated. And so, yeah, he's a work in progress, but he is alive and well. You can post a picture so everyone's not like, he's alive and well, plays t-ball, has a broken arm, like a normal little 5-year-old. He's happy. He's happy and whole and fun. And I have been doing a lot of healing.
Yeah. Well, I am so grateful to you for coming on the Milk Making Minutes and sharing your two vastly different stories. I am really glad that you got that first euphoric breastfeeding story because breastfeeding is deeply biological. And I know it might have made that second situation a little bit harder because of your tendency to compare, right? But, you know, I feel happy anytime somebody gets to experience that with their child. And I'm sorry for the struggle that you experienced that second time around. And I do hope that you walk away from this conversation feeling proud of all that you accomplished.
Thank you.
Feeling okay to grieve.
Thank you. This has been an amazing experience. Just one, I didn't know how uneducated I was, which I'm not saying is bad. It's just eye-opening. Like, wow, you're right. I'm so glad you're out there educating because people need that. And then two, just feeling what I love is just validation. I'm a huge validation person, and I am proud of myself. And I'm grateful that I accidentally had a great nursing. Like it was all by chance that first one went great because it wasn't the hospital being amazing. You know what I mean? It was just by chance and luck.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've heard two things. One, either that hospitals intentionally really work hard at making breastfeeding really good. Or two, I have heard that sometimes in really small towns, the support is just, they have the time and the staff to make it so that people walk out feeling like they just had people around all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. The first one was great. The second hospital was a little bit different, but because I had to go to one with a NICU, of course. But yeah, I could just ramble on forever. But really, thank you so much for letting me do this and letting me come on. I love what you're doing, and I support you. I'm a subscriber, even though I'm not nursing.
So as we're closing out, do you have any like moment or feeling from breastfeeding that you'll take with you into old age that you want to share?
Yes. With both kids, when nursing was going well, it's a connection. Like there are no words to describe the connection. It is, as I had said, heavenly. It is the most natural, beautiful, connecting moment. And I just hope however anyone chooses to feed their kid that they can find that moment in looking in your child's eyes while you're feeding them. It's just beautiful. And it's my safe place.
Yes, absolutely. And people can definitely make it happen with the bottle too, for sure.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Milk Making Minutes. I hope you walk away from this conversation as in awe of Chelsea and her resilience and love for her children as I have. She endured so much to try to provide breast milk for her baby in a time of great struggle. And even if you have never sat at your child's bedside during hospitalizations and surgeries, I know you can relate to wanting so badly to provide the best for your baby at any given moment. I hope you can take a minute to see all that you do for your children, breast milk or formula, breast or pump, daycare or staying at home. You are doing your best. You're a great mom. If you are looking for a community of moms who understand all the struggles of breastfeeding, a place where you can get solid, evidence-based breastfeeding advice, check out my growing Facebook community called the Milk Making Minutes Community Group. And if you're looking for more vulnerable conversations about lots of things that can happen in this life here on Earth, check out Chelsea's podcast called Beyond the Picket Fence. I've enjoyed it, and I know you will too.